The only word that I can think of that describes how I feel is inadequate. I've always wanted to do more for my wife, but she's always assured me over and over that things are fine and that she just needs the time and space to process things. Yet night after night, the routine has been the same. Just before 11 p.m., as if driven by some unseen force, Ellen rises, quietly excuses herself, and disappears into the bathroom. The door clicks shut, and then comes the sound of the lock sliding into place. Shortly after, I hear muffled crying, not loud, but just enough to fill the silence of the night. I sit there, helpless, listening. My mind races with questions that never seem to find answers. When did this start? Did I do something wrong? Did I miss something back when we were first dating? I replay our entire relationship in my head, searching for signs I might have overlooked, all while waiting for her to come out of the bathroom. We met during our junior year of college. It was at one of those cliche frat parties, jerseys, shorts they called it. As you'd expect, every guy and girl there was decked out in some kind of sports jersey and a pair of cutoff jeans. Our eyes met. While we were stuck in an obnoxiously loud line for drinks, she was stunning, absolutely beautiful. I must have stared a little too long because she eventually smiled and introduced herself. Ellen Callis. She complimented my Mutombo Nuggets jersey, a vintage piece exploding with vibrant colors. I returned the favor, admiring her retro Robinson USA jersey, a classic. She laughed and admitted she had borrowed it from her roommate. A few minutes into our conversation, I realized she didn't even know who Dikembe Mutombo or David Robinson were. We laughed about it, and then we laughed some more about everyone in their ridiculous jean shorts. Why can't people just admit they like wearing jean shorts? She said. From there, the conversation flowed like it always had been meant to happen. We made fun of Greek life, swapped stories about our classes and roommates, and somehow managed to talk the entire night. I was in love. We followed each other on Instagram after that party. It took 3 weeks of me sending her memes, most of which she hearted, before she finally sent me a message. Do you want to get coffee with me? I couldn't believe it. Later that week, we met at Picasso's Coffee. I couldn't stop talking about how much I loved cold brew, only to be completely thrown off when she ordered tea. Panicked, I ordered a berry blast smoothie instead of my usual coffee. What if she doesn't like coffee drinkers? I thought to myself. When we finally sat down, she pointed at our drinks and laughed. Neither of us got coffee. Maybe it's a sign we'll have to go again sometime soon. She was right. I officially asked Ellen to be my girlfriend one morning at an art museum. We were sipping actual coffee this time, standing in front of Van Gogh's The Ravine. It was her favorite painting, and she loved explaining why. Not only is it one of his masterpieces, she said, but underneath it, there's a completely different painting, maybe another masterpiece. He struggled to decide which image he wanted the world to see. I loved the way she talked about art, the way her mind worked. She's always been so much wiser than me. Time flew by after that. Sometimes the years feel like a single memory. Ellen and I have been married for 3 years. Now, we have a beautiful 8-month-old daughter named Zoe. From the outside, I'd like to think we look like the picture of a happy family. Weekend trips to the park, family dinners, bedtime stories every night. It's everything I ever dreamed of. Ellen has been everything I ever wanted in a partner, loving, supportive, and devoted to our family. I think we've been in love since that very first coffee date. Having Zoe has only deepened that love. But her nightly ritual still weighs on me. Every night at 11 p.m., Ellen locks herself in the bathroom and cries. When she comes out, her eyes are red and puffy, but she always smiles and says she's fine. The truth is, I can't quite remember when it started, maybe a few weeks after we moved into our new house. Looking back, maybe it did begin around then. It was a year of overwhelming change. We got engaged, married, and pregnant all within 12 months. I lost my job, and it took longer than expected to find a new one. Ellen lost her mom to breast cancer. It was too much. All at once, I told myself this was just her way of coping with grief, stress, and the weight of everything happening so fast. One night, after a particularly intense crying session, I asked, Ellen, are you okay? She climbed into bed slowly, her face still wet with tears. She smiled softly and said, I'm okay, really, just thinking about things. What kind of things? I asked gently. She waved me off, kissed me on the cheek, and changed the subject. I let it go, thinking it was just a rough patch. We all have those, don't we? But as time passed, I realized it wasn't just a phase, it was something deeper, something that didn't fade. Her 11 p.m. ritual continued, no matter where we were, on vacation, at a friend's house, even out on date nights. One day, I hoped she'd finally open up to me in bed, late at night, when that drowsy mixture of comfort and courage makes you feel safe enough to share your deepest secrets. I was ready for anything, grief, guilt, pain, any explanation, but now I'll never know. I read back what I've written and realize I haven't made something clear. In some ways, Ellen is still here with Zoe and me. We lost Ellen in a car accident recently. On July 5th, just before dawn, she got up early to meet her dad at the harbor for their annual mile swim. It was a tradition they kept every year. The morning after the 4th of July, they used to joke that swimming calmed the fish, who were spooked by the fireworks the night before. The morning Ellen left us is a day I'll never forget. She never made it to the pier. She was hit by a drunk driver who was just coming home from the bars. And just like that, it was me and Zoe. Our families stepped in to help where they could. My parents have been doing their best, though they still work full-time. Ellen's dad tried for a while, but the grief of losing both his wife and daughter became too much for him. A few weeks after Ellen's funeral, he told me he needed to go to Greece to visit family. I hadn't even known they had family in Greece. Ellen never mentioned them, nor had anyone in her family. He left abruptly, and I didn't press him for more. Looking back, I wish I'd asked Ellen's dad about it when I first noticed her late night crying. Had she done it when she lived at home? Had anyone else noticed? Maybe I should have pushed Ellen herself harder for answers or suggested therapy. We could have gone together, tried to work through it as a team, but now here I am, still unable to help someone I love. The night Ellen died, I came home after hours in the cold, fluorescent hospital waiting room. My parents stayed with me that night, helping with Zoe. She was just a baby, far too young to understand what had happened. But that night, something strange happened. When I put Zoe to bed, she started crying, a loud, gut-wrenching cry, nothing like the soft, sleepy whimpers I was used to. I picked her up and held her, soothing her as best I could, until she finally calmed down. It wasn't until she fell asleep in my arms that I glanced at the clock. It was a few minutes past 11 p.m. My stomach dropped. I told myself it was just a coincidence. But as the days turned into weeks, I couldn't deny it anymore. Every night at 11 p.m., on the dot, Zoe would cry. Not just normal crying either. It was horrible, a long, drawn-out wail that made her little body writhe as if she were in unbearable pain. I held her tightly, rocking her, whispering reassurances she couldn't understand. But no matter what I did, the crying always came. Some nights as Zoe cried, the room would grow cold, the kind of cold that seeped into your bones, making the air heavy and oppressive. Other nights, it was the opposite. The room would feel unnaturally warm, almost comforting, but still eerie. I know how this must sound. I feel crazy even saying it. Finally, I couldn't keep it to myself anymore. I told my parents about Zoe's nightly crying. At first, they thought I was imagining things, overwhelmed with grief. I didn't tell them about Ellen's similar habit. I couldn't bring myself to admit it. Not out of shame for Ellen, but because I felt ashamed of myself for never doing more to help her. Still, they insisted I take Zoe to a doctor. We started with our pediatrician, Dr. Connolly. He gave Zoe a full exam, checked her vitals, growth, reflexes, everything. She was perfectly healthy. After a long discussion about her symptoms, he suggested we rule out sleep disorders, like parasomnia or night terrors, but the initial tests showed nothing unusual. So he referred us to a pediatric neurologist, Dr. Patel. Dr. Patel was thorough. She performed a complete neurological exam, testing Zoe's motor coordination, sensory responses, and cranial nerve function. Then she ordered an EEG to check for abnormal brain activity, looking for signs of epilepsy or other seizure disorders. The EEG came back normal. Dr. Patel moved on to advanced imaging, an MRI and a PET scan to look for structural or metabolic abnormalities in Zoe's brain. Again, nothing. No tumors, no lesions, no irregularities. Despite all the tests, Zoe was perfectly healthy. In the end, Dr. Patel offered a suggestion that was both vague and unsettling. Her body might be reacting to something not physically present but emotionally imprinted. It wasn't much of an answer. It only left me with more questions. Last week, as I held Zoe through one of her cries, I decided I needed help, real help. I grabbed my phone and started recording. I did this for 3 nights in a row. Then I emailed the recordings to Dr. Patel with a single note, please. Listen to these. I sent the email on Friday morning. This afternoon, my mom was watching Zoe while I worked. Around 3 p.m., she came rushing into my office, phone in hand. "Dr. Patel is calling," she said. I snatched the phone and answered immediately. Dr. Patel's voice was calm, but laced with something I hadn't heard before, unease. "I've been listening to the recordings all weekend," she said. "This cry, it's unlike anything I've ever encountered from an infant or any human. She paused, searching for the right words. "It's astonishing. Did you edit these recordings?" "Ah, no, of course not," I replied. She fell silent again, then finally said, "I'd like to run more tests. I need to monitor her during an episode. Can you bring her in tomorrow night?" "From 10 p.m. to midnight?" "Yes," I answered without hesitation. "Thank you. Tonight, I'll hold Zoe again as she cries," whispering the same reassurances I've been giving her every night. "I'll tell her it will be over soon, that she doesn't need to cry. But deep down, I know the truth. I don't know if I can help her. I just hope tomorrow night brings answers." Second story, I've always known my boyfriend is a genuinely nice guy. It's one of the things that initially drew me to him. We've been dating since the start of the year, and while I love his kind-hearted nature, there's always been this nagging question in the back of my mind. Can he assert boundaries when he needs to, or will his tendency to avoid conflict leave him vulnerable to uncomfortable situations? He's admitted as much to me. He's a big people pleaser and he struggles with boundaries. I understand where he's coming from because I've had my own challenges with people pleasing, though I don't think it's as deeply ingrained in me as it is in him. Sometimes his desire to please others has even left me feeling embarrassed. He'll occasionally deflect uncomfortable social situations by throwing me under the bus just to save face, which stings more than I'd like to admit. This past weekend brought all these feelings to the surface. He attended a wedding I couldn't join him for, and when he came back and told me about the night, my heart sank. Apparently, a girl had been flirting with him throughout the evening. By the end of the night, another woman who's in an open relationship came over, snuggled onto his knee, and kissed him on the cheek while telling him she missed him. Hearing this made me jealous. Not because I don't trust him, I do. I know he'd never cheat on me, but I also know him well enough to understand that he wouldn't have done much to stop it, especially if he felt uncomfortable. When I asked if he moved away or tried to find her boyfriend, he admitted that he didn't. He told me he froze up because he felt too awkward to do anything in the moment. I believe him when he says he didn't know how to handle it, and I don't think he had any malicious intent. Still, it left me feeling hurt and unsettled. It's not just this one incident, it's the pattern. It's the way he struggles to prioritize his own feelings, or even mine, over those of someone else in the moment, even when that person is clearly crossing a line. When I pressed him about it, he admitted he should have pushed her away or done something to set a boundary, but he didn't know how. That's the part that really gets to me. I love him deeply, but I can't help but feel like his people-pleasing tendencies are creating more and more problems for us. This isn't the first time I've noticed it either. His friends and even his family sometimes treat him like a doormat, and it's painful to watch. I want to support him and help him grow, but it's hard not to feel hurt when his inability to assert himself ends up affecting me directly. Now I'm left questioning if this is something I can help him work through, or if it's just who he is. I want to be patient. I want to believe that he can learn to set boundaries and assert himself when it matters. But how much of that is realistic? And how much of it is me wishing for something that might not change? I don't know what to do. I love that he's a good person, but it hurts to see him struggle like this. It hurts to feel like his kindness sometimes comes at the expense of my feelings. TL. DR, my 28F boyfriend, 27M, is too nice and struggles with setting boundaries. At a wedding, a girl snuggled up to him and kissed him on the cheek, and he was too uncomfortable to get up or push her away. I trust him, but I'm hurt by how he handles situations like this. I'm questioning if I can help him grow or if this is something I need to accept. Third story, a year of change. When love faces tough truths for just over a year, 29-year-old Lila and 38-year-old Eric had shared their lives, slowly building a relationship that seemed promising at first. When they first met, they consciously avoided rushing into intimacy, steering clear of the physical focus that often dominated modern dating. Instead, they took their time, 5 weeks of dating in person before Eric left for an extended trip abroad to visit his family. While apart, they stayed connected daily, exchanging messages, and calls that brought them closer without the added weight of physical expectations. By the time Eric returned, Lila felt they had built a strong foundation. Their first intimate moment after his return was good, though they quickly discovered their differences in preferences. Lila, a self-identified kinky person, had been working on rethinking these desires through therapy, recognizing they stemmed from past negative experiences. Meanwhile, Eric's approach was more straightforward. Months passed and their relationship grew more serious. They moved in together, a decision that symbolized their commitment. But cracks began to show, intimacy dwindled. Their physical encounters became sporadic, just 6 or 8 times in over a year, and lacked warmth or connection. When they did happen, it felt rushed and awkward. Eric wasn't initiating, and even when Lila tried to flirt or suggest a moment together, he would dismiss her with excuses like, "I'm tired." Initially, Lila chalked it up to their busy lives. She had been juggling a full-time job and a demanding professional program that left her drained. After graduating in the summer, she had more time for herself and started focusing on her health. She had gained some weight during the relationship, 20 pounds to be exact, and began going to the gym with Eric, making diet changes to feel better about herself. But Eric's disinterest in her didn't waver. The last 2 times they were intimate, he barely made an effort, leaving Lila feeling uncomfortable. Even with lube, the emotional toll began to weigh on her. "I thought it might be his age," Lila admitted to herself, reasoning that approaching 40 could mean a lower libido. But his lack of enthusiasm extended beyond the bedroom. Even when she proposed thoughtful date ideas, a hockey game, or a fancy restaurant, Eric only responded with a non-committal thumbs-up emoji. Adding to her frustration was Eric's hesitance to fully move into their shared apartment, despite both being on the lease. He spent much of his time at his parents' home, caring for an elderly family dog. While Lila understood his attachment to the 14-year-old pet, the delays and lack of communication left her feeling anxious and unimportant. Eventually, after months of tiptoeing around the issue, Lila confronted Eric directly. "Do you even find me attractive anymore?" she asked. He hesitated but finally admitted, "You've gained a lot of weight. The last few times we were together, I just couldn't." His words hit her like a gut punch. Lila had been working hard to improve herself, yet here was the person she loved essentially, telling her she wasn't enough, even when she made an effort with makeup and cute outfits. His responses were lukewarm. "Sure," he'd say with a dispassionate tone. What made it more confusing was that Eric still showed he cared in other ways. He cooked healthy meals for her, took care of her when she was sick, and even playfully slapped her behind, saying he appreciated her figure. But when it came to expressing desire, he seemed distant and detached. Lila felt trapped between conflicting emotions. She loved Eric despite his flaws. He wasn't a model himself, his potbelly and Hank Hill-like physique didn't make him a standout catch. But she had always found his personality, intelligence, and face attractive. Now she couldn't shake the pain of his rejection. What if she lost the weight and he found her attractive again? Would she still feel hurt and hesitant to be vulnerable with him? Could they ever repair what was missing? Lila stared at the ceiling that night, her mind racing with questions she couldn't yet answer.